Now, at least, what are we at? 15 years ago, as of 15 years ago, although they intermarry, although they live together, the Hopi people never speak the Tewa language. Okay? Now, if you look at it from a how did that happen sort of perspective that does not include the spiritual element, when they're a matrilocal society. So when a Tewa man and a Hopi woman marry, the Hopi man will go live with the a Tewa man and a Hopi woman will go live with the Hopi tribe. A Hopi man marrying a Tewa woman will go and live with the Tewa tribe. So he will live in a home surrounded by people who speak only Tewa. But every time he tries to speak the Tewa language, he will be ridiculed and teased relentlessly until he will not try anymore. And so they keep the division between the language. And I love that story so much. It would be. Yeah, it would be rough. Well, I imagine that realistically, although they may not speak the language, they likely understand it very well, right? They're just not able to speak in it. So it may not be quite as isolating as you would think. And the Tewa are very small in comparison to the Hopi people at large. They're a very small percentage. Pity is dangerous. We have to be careful where we place that. Before I would ever say that I necessarily could understand what that experience is like or that I felt sorry for them, I would have to speak to someone who is in that position and ask them what it is like. Because the way that we imagine a thing that is outside of our experience is very rarely what it is. Yeah, yeah, I understand. But their experience of the thing may or may not be similar to your experience of the thing, right? When people try to imagine what it must be to be blind, I hear you. And I'm not telling you what you should or shouldn't feel. So please understand, that's not what I mean by it. Um, what I know is that when people try to imagine what it's like to be blind, they close their eyes. They close their eyes and they try to do things. And what they come against is so overwhelming, is so disheartening that okay, there was when YouTube used to do all of those challenges, like the the ice bucket challenge and all those the cinnamon challenge, those things, they had a blindfold challenge at one point where it was intended to create understanding and acceptance of the struggles that were faced by individuals who were blind. So people would throw on a blindfold and they would try to do daily activities that they would normally do in order to understand what it's like for a blind person to do it. It was one of the things that set us back as a blind community so much because, yes, that would be the experience of a person who just lost their vision. It is nothing like the experience of living as a blind person. You do not try to live your life like a sighted person when you are blind for long. You learn new things. You learn new ways. One of the specific examples that upset me personally regarding this particular experimentation was this mom who took her kids to the park, and she sat on the bench the way sighted mothers do. She sent her kids out to go play, and when she was finished with it, she said, "There's no way. There's no way I would be able to watch my kids and keep them safe. I couldn't tell their voice from other children's voices." Um, and she was horrified. Now, what does that do to the psychology of people who are trying to understand how a blind mother can safely raise her children, right? It makes them feel like it's not possible. I had kids. I was a single mom. A lot of people didn't understand that I was capable of being a good mom. But when I took my kids to the park, I didn't sit on a bench. I was on the playground with them. I was next to them the whole time. In a lot of ways, I feel like being a blind mother kept me more connected to my kids because I was by their side. I was involved in what they were doing every day, all the time, and that's how I knew they were safe. You don't function the same way. You don't hear the same way. You don't touch or move the same way as someone who relies on vision. And my poor people who've been here for 4 years have heard all of these stories and thoughts and ideas so many fucking times that it must be absolutely mind-dulling, and I'm sorry. But it's the things that fascinate me. They are the things that stick with me and shape my understanding of reality. Yeah, I appreciate that. A lot of people do. I have a lot of people who don't even understand how I, as a blind person, live alone and take care of myself, let alone taking care of children. I don't think they necessarily think bad. They think incapable, right? They don't see how it could be done. Because with their understanding of the way that things are, I know. But unless you have a conversation with someone who is a blind mother, how will you know? How will you know how it's different, why it's different, what it looks like? Empathy is tricky. It really is, right? The only way that empathy truly works is if we are open to the person we are trying to empathize with telling us we're wrong about how we understand it. We can imagine it as well as we can imagine it, but our imaginations are limited by our experience. All right, I have the Megasmate. I think we need to do the curry paste. Exactly. And that's why I love meeting people. I love hearing ideas. I love hearing experiences is my favorite thing. Well, imagination needs um it needs boundaries. It needs guidance. There is no limit, but oh goodness, our culture makes me very upset, honestly. Um, I am horrified by our culture on a daily basis, which is, I think, why I became an anthropologist. But that's a dangerous topic right there. Oh, see, you're going to get me to say things that are going to get me in trouble. uh, that's where I have to bring real. No, 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 don't be sorry. It's just. I know, I know. Um, that is one of the greatest fascinating aspects of the American culture. We don't know that we have a culture. We believe that we are a melting pot, and we do not acknowledge that we actually, as a country, have a culture. But if we leave this country and go into other countries, they know us. They identify us. We have a culture, but it is invisible to us. That is part of when you study the culture of America. Um, gosh, it's such a complicated question, the issues that I have with American culture. Um, the embedded concepts of greed and um, selfishness that are ingrained in us, the lack of community, the there are individuals. How are they ingrained? When you have a baby, and that baby is in its earliest years in developing, one of the first things that we do is try to teach that child independence. Independence is one of our greatest, highest virtues. And independence in and of itself is not a bad thing. But the focus is the self. Yes. The culture is the self, right? It is that is what we are the most focused on. That is my favorite article. Um, it is fascinating and thought provoking, and I suggest you read it. Villa, you know me so well. I've become predictable. But what we do with babies, I went through this personally, right? You have a baby, the baby is crying, and people will tell you every day, all the time, they'll say, put the baby in their crib and let them cry it out. They need to cry it out in order to learn that they are okay alone, in order to develop independence, in order to not become a mama's boy, in order to not be attached to your apron strings, sorry. Um, we start trying to force them to be independent before they can speak or crawl or walk or ever let us know anything about what they need or want or feel or hope before they have hopes. It is in the earliest developmental years. Even the concept of ownership is cultural, right? Um, the Romani. The Romani people had a history many, many years ago of breaking the law. They were known as criminals. They often ended up in jail. There was a lot of issues that we had with the Romani people. There was this anthropologist that started doing some work in trying to understand the Romani. And what they found is there was no such thing as a personally owned item. It was owned by your people. It was owned by your group, right? So when they let their cousin, uncle, brother use their social security number wasn't theirs. It was shared. Um, there are just examples after examples of how different ways of understanding the way these things fundamentally work shapes what we think is right and wrong. Oh my God, I forgot. I forgot about the tomatoes. I got so involved in what I was doing. I forgot about the tomatoes. It's fine. It's fine. They're not burnt. They're just very well done. It's fine. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. No, I don't have 3 pounds of tomatoes. Nobody panic. I mean, at least I remembered eventually. Good, good, good. And this camera would look like it was burning even if it hadn't actually burnt, so I'll take it. Goodness. I got too involved. Um, we come from a history of colonization. Um, there are many. There are many. We also have a culture that believes that it is right all the time. We believe that we are absolutely right, whatever it is that we believe. We are the best. We are the most important. We are the strongest. We are babies. We're children. We have a lot of learning to do. Hmm. Where are you from, Candy? Europe. We have we have a very, very, very short history. Um, I think of us as like teenagers, maybe those egotistical young 20s. So many other countries have such a long and remembered and connected to history. Now, there are many positives about American culture, so please, I am grateful. I am grateful that I live here. There are many countries. Yeah. Um, I'm grateful that I'm here. I would not have the opportunities that I have here in many other parts of the world. Okay? So, the fact that I can say that I have problems with my own culture is a luxury of my culture, right? The fact that I think my opinion is important enough to express in a public forum is an aspect of my culture. The fact that although we often fail, we try. Chickly, the early 20s have many positives. Many positives. But there is a necessary naivety um, based on the lack of a fully developed brain, the lack of experience, the lack of exposure, um, having not. You are very normal, and you are extremely well behaved, and you're one of my favorite young 20s. Um, but I was in my early 20s once too, and I do not exclude myself from where you are psychologically in your early 20s. There are many positives. There are also some things that will be detrimental in your belief system to yourself. It is not meant to be. My point is not. My point is not that being in your early 20s is bad. My point is that being in your early 20s has its limitations. And an intelligent early 20-year-old will find people with more life experience than they have at that point and hold conversations and critically think about what they hear in response. Very few people in that age range do so. Very few people in their early 20s care what somebody in their 60s, 70s, or 80s has to say. We treat our elderly so poorly, so poorly. I am not saying that someone deserves respect simply because they're old, but they lived an awfully long time. And somewhere in there, there may be gems. And completely discounting them as people, as thinkers, as livers, as people who have wisdom is ignorant. I do tend to tell the same stories over and over. Yeah. I've had ageism has been on my mind a lot because I was reading this book and I was reading this book as written is these little blog posts that were written by this woman in her 80s. And I don't need to earn it. I fucking lived this long. Dovey, in all honesty, for real, the book that I put in the book channel on the Discord, you might enjoy it. She is a very intelligent, eloquent, witty woman. Um, and I find her ideas fascinating. I don't need to agree with all of them, but I still find the way her mind moves to be very fascinating. Yeah. She has these accounts and sort of references back to having lived through the first waves of feminism and things of that nature that are just really fascinating. I think for some reason, a lot of people tend to associate people who are elderly with flat out bigots and racists, with people who no longer have their cognitive abilities, with people who are diminished and incapable. And that is such a tragedy. We have a lot of isms that we talk about a great deal. I find that we don't talk about ageism that much. It is. feel like I like kind of somewhat um, dehydrated my tomatoes. Yeah. Well, yeah, I might have to. It reminds me, it reminds me of when I look at what we did to some of the cultures that we colonized and we rewrote and we erased and we forgot all of their wisdom, right? But they had knowledge about their environment, about survival within that environment. They had crucial information about sustainability, about survivability, and we lost it. We erased it because we thought they didn't know anything. We gave them no value. And yeah, I know. And that is many of us, unfortunately. Um, I'm not necessarily angry at Christianity as a whole. I see a lot of flaws, but I don't have the personal connection that causes the severe reaction. But I do have a very, very strong negative response to the one that I was raised in. Um, I used to talk about it more on stream, and I actually had people like leave my stream because they were so upset uh, about that. Uh, but all I can go off of is the lived experience of having been in it. Yeah, yeah. It is very interesting to be in Montana because in Texas, we have a lot of people who claim Native American heritage, many falsely, right? But we think we have a Native American population. However, we do not have any reservations. We the closest reservations are in New Mexico and in Oklahoma, um, but not in Texas. Coming up here, there are many tribes, many reservations, and the cultural strain that exists here between the overall Montana Caucasian population, because it is predominantly Caucasian here, like massively. Um, and those tribal individuals, it's heartbreaking to see. It's not a one-way street. It's not. It's never as simple as we want to make it. There's a lot of anger on both sides. There was an injustice done to a people. That is undeniable. But there is also a lot of rage about the injustices that were done. And the animosity that exists continues on because both sides participate, right? I had a friend who was talking to someone in college who was in one of the tribes here. And the native gentleman came to him one day and said, "You seem angry. Why are you so angry?" And they got to having an honest, open, and somewhat offensive conversation, which is why in my real life, I actually think those are a positive. I'm not going to do it on the internet because I don't want to get canceled. It's very easy to get misconstrued here. You're not talking to one person, you're talking to the whole world, right? But in that particular conversation, one of the Caucasian individual said, "How much are you paying to come to this college?" And the guy said, "Nothing." And he said, "Okay, This is what I'm paying to come to this college. And this is where I came from. That